Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, lovers of language and defenders of the Oxford comma. I want to welcome you back to the LA Times main stage. I'm Stuart K. Robinson, your host, and I am thrilled to introduce our next speaker. And just for the fun of it, I'm going to make this a true daily double. Okay. So I'm going to take authors appearing at the LA Times Festival of Books for 2000. She is a former software engineer, a writer, and recent Jeopardy champion. Now, following a 40-game winning streak, she became the most successful woman ever to compete on Jeopardy, and is second all time in the show's all-time history, trailing only who? Ken Jennings. She's also the first openly transgender contestant to qualify for the Tournament of Champions. And she is here today with Los Angeles Times senior audience editor, Vanessa Franco, to discuss her book, Our Winning Answer, Who is Amy Schneider? Questions on growing up, being curious, and winning it big on Jeopardy. So make some noise, everybody, for the main stage guests, Vanessa Franco, and our special guest, Amy Schneider!
Hi.
Hello.
Okay, first question. Do you ever accidentally answer things in the form of a question?
I have been known to when it's a trivia situation. Yes, I was doing a thing at SF Sketchfest that was like, it was like comedy version of Family Feud, and I would get up there and I did the thing and I said what is whatever, and everybody laughed at me. But you know, I've been watching Jeopardy for 40 years. It does get to be a habit.
Well, first, like the obvious question, why adapt your memoir into a version for young readers?
Yeah, well, you know, when I did my memoir, when I wrote it, you know, I was debating, but I realized that there were things that I felt important to me to tell about my story that were not appropriate for younger readers. And while I felt that was the right decision, it was something that disappointed me because that, you know, I was a young reader, and, you know, it was an audience I wanted to reach. And fortunately also my agent primarily worked in children's literature, so she was all on board with making an adaptation of it herself. So it was a pretty easy decision once, you know, they actually gave me the opportunity. I definitely wanted to do that.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, because you do touch on some very like adult themes
Yes.
in your memoir, like about the process of how you did that and how you're able to relate it to younger readers.
Yeah, you know, I definitely, you know, I had a question, like, is this, like, how can I adapt this? But once I sat down and was looking at it, I realized that there was, you know, plenty in there that was appropriate for younger readers. And then I did have help, someone with experience writing for, you know, kind of a middle grade audience, because just in terms of, you know, what sort of language to use, how to talk to that audience, because that's not something that I've done before. And so, you know, working with her to, you know, find the right tone and everything, and then, you know, sort of just going through and being like, okay, here are the things we've taken out. Now, how do we, you know, put it all back together in a way that kind of flows a little more coherently? And also we talked about, okay, what are things that we can add? You know, I think that one thing that's different about writing for a younger audience is that you can be a lot more... I was thinking about myself as a younger reader and how I was more than happy to read things that were just like kind of data dumps, just a bunch of like facts and inside things that, you know, I didn't care about it being necessarily about it being a coherent story as much. And I was thinking a lot about one of the books I liked as a kid that was just about the PBS series Ramona, that was adapting the Ramona Quimby books, and it was just like all these behind the scenes thing. Like, how did they do this scene where she imagined having scrambled eggs in her hair is a thing I remember, and what was the audition process like, and all these sorts of things. So I was realizing that I could give a lot more of that kind of stuff that as an adult I might have found a little boring, but I knew kids might like.
You know, that PBS Ramona show was so underrated. Like, also a huge fan of it. You know, one of the things that I really loved about the book is that in every chapter, you talked about what you were going through, and I feel like you really found a way to relate to, like, what the young reader might be going through. Like, was that something that kind of came up naturally as you were going through it, or is, like, were you reflecting more, like, as you went through it, like, how you were feeling at the time as when you were that age?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was fairly natural. I mean, I know, I think that it was about, like, again, just putting myself back in, you know, what not only did what I liked to read as a kid, but also, you know, what are the things that the stories that weren't available to me as a kid that I wish had been. You know, I mean, certainly a lot of that being around my trans identity, that certainly wasn't a thing that existed when I was a kid. You know, like, there was no such thing as trans people as far as I was aware or anyone was aware. And so what sort of stories might have made a difference to me when I was that age was definitely something that was very much on my mind.
Well, I think that, not only that, but you also talked about being diagnosed with ADHD. And I feel like, you know, one of the things that really struck me is that you really went out there, like you just said, to, like, so kids can see themselves in your book.
Yeah, I mean, you know, as far as that goes, I mean, because in a similar way, it's not that, you know, ADD as it was at the time didn't exist, but there was certainly a lot of skepticism about it, like, you know, but as far as a lot of people, like, felt, you know, ADD was just another word for, like, disobedient, basically. And so, you know, it wasn't something that I would have been diagnosed with or would have been happy being diagnosed with at the time. And, you know, as an adult coming to think of it differently and to realize that it's just a brain that works in a different way and obviously has not held me back from success in life or anything like that. So that was, again, a message that I would have loved to have as a kid. And so just, you know, and it's such an amazing feeling that this opportunity has come to me in my life to be able to put that out in the world. I never thought I'd be in a position to write a book at all and you know, have an audience for it.
You know, you mentioned the Ramona Quimby book. What book were you absolutely obsessed with when you were a kid?
The number one answer is The Pushcart War by Jean Merrill, I believe. And it is about a theoretical thing that happened in New York where the truck drivers all conspired to, like, push out the push carts and drive them out of the city, and there's, like, a corrupt mayor that is working with them, and the push cart drivers all have to get together and unify and figure out a way to fight back. And it's such a, like, in retrospect, very, like, leftist, like, solidarity, you know, action sort of thing, but it was just, like, an exciting adventure with all different characters and, you know, kind of silliness to it. And I also, as a kid, like, it's written as a documentary of a historical event, and for a time as a kid I thought it was. And I remember going to New York to visit, we had an aunt and uncle there, and I wanted to go to see the sights in the book and see the statue of General Anna that was supposedly in Tompkins Square Park, which was not there, and I was disappointed by that. But yeah, I can't tell you how many times I read that book as a kid.
What is one thing about your book that nobody else knows?
I don't know what do people know? I think, I guess what I would say is that, what maybe people don't necessarily know is that, I can't imagine ever having finished it had I not been given an advance and eventually told that if I didn't finish the book, they would take the advance back. Because it was, you know, it was hard. It was, like, enjoyable and wonderful and so hard to just push myself over the finish line.
You know, you talk about in this version of the book, like having so many young fans who reached out to you. You know, kids look up to you. Obviously, more are going to be looking up to you as they read the book. You know, now that it's out, can you talk a little bit about who are the trans people who are older than you, who helped pave the way and helped give you hope when you were coming out?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, like the first answer to that is, you know, just all the trans people from, you know, like, you know, Stonewall days and things like that. And I mean, just going back forever, like, you know, I cannot imagine having come out, you know, facing the things that they were facing then. But more directly in my life, there's one I've talked about before, a comedian in San Francisco named Natasha Muse, who was kind of the first trans person that I ever knew personally. And seeing her, I mean, first of all, just an incredibly smart, funny person that was just fun to be around. And also just seeing her and realizing that there wasn't anything weird about being trans. She was just a normal person with a wife and kids living her life and just happened to be, you know, a woman. And so that was really important to me. And then I think, you know, like, I think for a lot of people, Laverne Cox on Orange is the New Black. I mean, it was the first trans person I'd ever seen on TV that was just, I mean, that was first trans character played by a trans person basically ever. And also, like, you know, yeah, I mean, there was a lot of like drama around it, but also that wasn't everything about her. It wasn't just a trans person. And, you know, she also wasn't a serial killer making skin suits out of kidnapped women, which was a nice change.
And kind of on the flip side of that too, are there, like, who are younger people who are inspiring you right now and you're following?
I mean, you know, I don't know, like, I mean, anyone that is, you know, young and trans is just, it is amazing to me. It's something that, you know, I could not imagine. I mean, obviously, like I say, when I was a kid, it wasn't a thing that existed. And to see the confidence that, you know, young trans people have is amazing. You know, it's not, I never thought that it could happen. I mean, even, you know, when I came out, you know, as an adult, and I knew other, like, trans people, all of us had come out as adults, and all of us had suffered through our childhoods. And to know that there are trans people out there that don't have to do that, not that it isn't still a hard road in many ways and has gotten harder in the last few years, but that, you know, that are still able to go out there and live their lives is just a wonderful development in society.
Bringing it back to Jeopardy, one of the really, like, poignant passages I found in the book where you talked about, you know, like, you've been a Jeopardy fan, as you said, for 40 years.
Yeah.
And, you know, you've been taking the test and, like, you were destined for Jeopardy. But there was a time when you stopped taking the test. And then can you kind of talk about that? And, like,
yeah,
when you became comfortable and now we all know you because you were the champion.
Yeah, so I had been taking the test for, you know, years and years. Like, basically, since they started doing it online, I'd been taking it. But then when I came out as trans, that was maybe 6 or 7 years that I've been taking the test, and I stopped because I was so uncomfortable with myself, and so, you know, it was such a, you know, it was a hard coming out, and for a while, like, all I could see in myself and all I could imagine other people seeing in me was this weird, awkward trans person that was like, you know, do they even see me as trans? Do I just look like a man in a dress to them? And everything else about that. I mean, I just, like, I could barely manage being seen in real life, like, let alone being on TV and broadcast around the country. And then, you know, I got a little more comfortable with myself. And I also, you know, I think not even just getting comfortable with myself, I think I got to the point where I realized for sure that I wasn't going back, that I was just going to keep being trans and keep being openly trans, and that this had been a dream my whole life, and that I was just not going to give up on it. And however uncomfortable it made me, it was less uncomfortable than the idea of giving up on something I'd wanted my whole life just because of what other people would think. And I think actually, going back to the previous question, the fact that I had seen other trans people on Jeopardy, and that, they had inspired me. Representation can sound like sort of a buzzword and it doesn't really mean anything, but, having experienced it, as much as I could know intellectually that trans people were allowed on Jeopardy or whatever, seeing other trans people on there made an incalculable difference. I could believe it because I had seen it happen. And so representation, really, it makes a powerful difference that, I didn't know until I felt it happen to me.
Okay, we have to talk about your incredible run. My burning question is, how hard was it to keep the secret about it? Because
Yeah. It was hard, and I definitely, I told more people than I was supposed to. But nonetheless, there were, a lot of people I didn't tell. I think, it was hard in the maybe 2 or 3 weeks between when I finished taping episodes and when it started. But what was really hard is once it started, not telling people how long it was going to go. Because I remember, my first episode aired, and I was getting texts from friends from high school and just people from my life just being congratulations, and then the next episode airs and they're saying congratulations again, and I'm like, if you're committing to texting me after every episode, that is a bigger commitment than you realize. So that, and then the other thing that was hard was in the week or so before my last episode aired, I was like, oh, people are going to be so sad, and I felt bad about it, but despite the fact that it was it already happened, and I had certainly the moment of losing was awful, but it was immediately followed by, I can't complain. I obviously, it was a success by any measure I could have imagined. But yeah, I knew that people, that I would have a certain amount of fans and that, people would be following my run and everything like that, but I didn't expect how much people would get invested in it. And so I felt so sad about disappointing them.
Did anybody actually text you? Did you have anyone who texted you after every game?
I don't think so. I don't think on everyone, no. I think people started, checking in a little less often, yeah.
They tapped out at some point. After you got to game 20.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite Jeopardy clue of all time? It could be on a show you were on or one that you just watch as a super fan.
I don't know that, there's so many of them. One that I kind of go to a lot, though, is one, it was a Final Jeopardy one once that I watched, and it was something along the lines of, this Tony-winning musical is named for, shares a title with painting by Marc Chagall. And what I like about it is, the path that you go there with it, because Chagall, is... One thing that from watching the show is that Chagall is one of those clues where, anytime the clue says, Jewish painter, the answer is always Marc Chagall. And so, knowing that, then you're thinking, okay, Tony-winning musical, Jewish-related probably, and then you're like, oh, Fiddler on the Roof, and then you think, Chagall painting Fiddler on the... That sounds like a painting of his, and so that's the answer. And so it's one that you can get to a few different ways. But it's also something, what I love about Jeopardy too is so often the clues will teach you something even if as you get to the answer. So I didn't know that that's how the Fiddler on the Roof got its name, or it was named after that painting. But so I could not only know the answer, but also learn something just from reading the clue.
That's so true. I've learned so many, things exactly the way you're saying, that path. You learn so many other factoids that make you even more of a force in future Trivial Pursuit competitions. Not that it's a full contact sport in my house or anything. But what was the best splurge that you spent your prize money on?
I got courtside tickets to a Warriors game. That was, yeah.
Nice. Nice. Did they put you on were you on the Jumbotron for it too?
Actually, I don't think I was for that. They invited me to a game kind of like, I think during my run or just after. Not put me courtside, but they did put me on the Jumbotron. So that was also a really cool experience. But yeah, like being down there, like, it's crazy. And also, like, and this is something I learned before when I'd gotten tickets that were like not that close but kind of close. Like, we all know intellectually that NBA players are very tall, but then you get there and you're like, they are so tall. It is shocking.
I absolutely love that. Have you ever had a Jeopardy stress dream? And if so, what is it?
You know, I mean, I'd say yes. I can't think like, you know, anything like specific about it. Just like, you know, it's just about, I think, just being, you know, in the green room or actually when we were there, it wasn't the green room, it was the Wheel of Fortune studio because it was COVID and we needed to spread out. But like, yeah, I do that. And also I think that like, and this is a stress dream that I've just had for as long as I can remember about like, I would have them like the night before dreaming that I had overslept. And then like kind of half waking up and being like, wait, did I? And then like, oh no, I didn't. And then trying to get back to sleep and that sort of thing. And yeah, and I did actually. And then one time I did actually oversleep, and that did not help with that dream.
So wait a minute, in that COVID dream room, did you actually get to spin the wheel, or was there like an alarm if you touched it?
It was covered with a tarp, and there was a sign saying "Do not touch under any circumstances." But just between us, on the first season of Jeopardy Masters, they did actually let us each spin the wheel one time. So they weren't supposed to, but they did.
I love it. Okay, I was so excited because I just saw you on Top Chef.
Yes.
What was that like as a Top Chef fan and a Jeopardy fan? Like, please tell me.
It was incredible. It was because I had in the last tournament of Jeopardy that I was on, like I mentioned on one of my anecdotes that I'd always wanted to do it, specifically in the hopes that like they would hear about it and invite me on, and it actually worked. So I got to be a guest judge on a quickfire on Top Chef. And it was like, you know, it was just like I imagined it, which is, you know, like, knowing, if you knew how much I imagined it, that's high praise. You know, everybody there was wonderful, and it was also just, you know, having been on a few different TV shows and video shoots, things like that, incredibly smooth operation, so well run. You know, like I saw they give us the call sheet and they're like, okay, your call is at this point, and then you'll be done about like 3.5 hours later. And I was like, there is no way you can get everything you need in that time. And by golly, they did. It's just like clockwork. And so that part of it was amazing too. And also like, you know, watching Top Chef all these years, the one thing is you never actually get to taste the food, right? And so, you know, you think you know what looks good and what doesn't. And I got to taste the food. And I will say, like, you know, yeah, we had to put some of the dishes on the bottom. They were there for a reason. But it was all so good. Like, they really are top chefs. They're not kidding around about that.
Could you beat Ken Jennings in a quickfire? Do you think you would beat him?
I enjoy eating food. I am not good at cooking it, nor do I think that I'm that qualified to judge it. I had a fun time, but I'm not, you know, yeah. No, I mean, I'll tell you what, I can cook Kraft macaroni and cheese better than anyone. I will go up against anyone on that, but beyond that, I don't know.
What has been the most surreal experience you've had since your run on Jeopardy?
You know, like, so many of them, but going to the White House, definitely. And like standing at the podium in the press briefing room was just it definitely like was kind of this out of body thing. And then, you know, I remember they were like, you know, just go up and like say a few words about, it was like the Trans Day of Visibility, so just, you know, say a few words. And they told me like a dozen times, like, don't worry, like, there's reporters there, but they're not going to ask any questions. Like, don't worry. And then I got up there and I said a few words, and the reporters started asking me questions. I mean, that's what they do. That's their job. And so I was like, I had like a split second, then I was like, well, if CJ Craig could do this, I can do this. And I answered a few questions. And then they were like, do you think the Democrats are doing enough for like trans rights? And I was like, I think I'm done with questions. I'm going to step off stage now.
Speaking of questions, I believe we've got some audience questions coming now.
Yeah, let's take a second and see if anyone out in the crowd. I see one hand in front of me. Nice talking to you. Come out in the aisle, if you will. Here's the rule. I have to hold the mic, but I'd love to hear your questions for Amy. So tell us your name and your question.
My name is Stephanie, and it was so impressive watching you episode after episode on Jeopardy. I know on Jeopardy they say to prepare if you're going to be on the show to read a lot and to travel. Like, what prepared you? Like, did you read a lot as a child? Like, what prepared you?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, I did read a lot as a child, but one of my stories about that is that my parents eventually made a rule at the library that I could only check out as many books as I myself could carry, because it was out of control. I think that I would say two things. One is that kind of the best preparation for Jeopardy is Jeopardy itself. Because like sort of as we were talking about, like it has a specific way of writing clues and you learn things about that over time. And so I definitely, for years, like I would have the J archive, that is a archive of all the clues they've ever had on the show. I would just kind of have it on my phone, and whenever I was like commuting on BART or just had some downtime, I would kind of like go through a little bit. But the other thing I think is that, is just to be, curious and interested in learning things. I read a lot. I read a lot of history. I think history is really good to read because it ends up tying into a lot of different areas. And just like, I spend a lot of time on Wikipedia, just like looking for things that I'm interested in. And, most of it never ends up coming up on Jeopardy, but, it's not just about knowing things, it's about remembering them. Mm-hmm. So the more different things you know, even if they don't come up directly, all those different things like tying together gives you associations that can help you pull the right thing into your memory at the right time.
Thank you. And I'm from Novato, Bay Area, love.
Excellent.
Hi, your name and your question.
My name is Valerie. This is Babe. And before I get started with my question, I just want to say I'm from San Francisco, and the community, you are an icon. We love you. Thank you so much for just being yourself. You're just a beautiful human being inside and out. And my question is actually kind of a silly question, but I'm kind of curious. You were on that show for so long, so many episodes. How did you come up with so many different tidbits about yourself every single episode? I would have died. I would I'm so boring. I can't come up with something else.
It was certainly a challenge. People ask me if I made any of them up, and the answer is no, but had I gone on another 5 or so episodes, I was starting to think about what made-up anecdotes I would use because I was running out. But they also, they've been doing this a long time, and there's, one of the people on the crew who, on game days, his whole job is working with the contestants and helping them come up, helping them decide what anecdote to use and working with them on that. So, he's got, a ton of experience on just, giving you prompts and think what about, travel anecdotes or this or that, and kind of helping jog your memory on things. But yeah, I mean, I definitely, and I also had a high standard for myself. I'm a performer, and I've done some stand-up comedy and things. I definitely wanted each of them to have a beginning and an end, kind of have a button at the end of it. But definitely sometimes I would come off the stage afterwards and be like, boy, that story was not interesting at all. But it filled a few seconds. That's its job.
Thank you. And I want to do a shout out to my mom, who's your biggest fan.
Hello, tell us your name and your question.
Hi, Amy. My name is Wendy. I live in West Hollywood. I'm an ally. And thank you so much for being here today. Welcome. I would like to know, first of all, do you and your wife have hobbies? And the second part is, what's next for you? Are you going to continue to advocate for others? Are you going to go back to work as an engineer? What's in the future for you?
Yeah, I'm not going to go back to work as an engineer. I was kind of burning out on that career when this happened, so that's not going to be it. In terms of hobbies, I don't know. We definitely do a lot of jigsaw puzzles, which is, I don't know, it's not that interesting, but we enjoy it. We definitely we do we like restaurants, and I don't know, like we I don't know, we have different things. Like we go through just like little different phases of different small crafting type things. And yeah, I mean, as for what next for me is something that I'm kind of like working on figuring out a lot. I do, I'm trying to like, I've got various ideas for like kind of what sort of like podcasting I might want to do, or YouTube. I think that like me and my brother actually are working on ideas for a podcast together, because like we're very close but very different. Like I moved out to California, he stayed in Dayton, Ohio, and he's like, still a very devout Catholic, but like we still agree on a lot of things. So I think that's something I want to do, because I think, when I think about advocacy, how do I reach the people that don't already agree with me, and how do I actually change some people's minds? Because obviously some people are not reachable, and there's no point in trying to talk to them, but there are plenty of people out there. I was raised very conservative, and I was raised to not believe in trans rights or gay rights or anything like that. And so I got here, and so I know that it's possible for people that are currently on the other side to come around. And so I don't know exactly what I'm going to be doing, but that's the lens that I'm always coming at it from, is how do I talk in a way that doesn't just put people on the defensive, that they can actually hear.
Thank you. Can I give you a gift?
Sure.
May I?
Sure. Security? Just kidding.
Oh, wow. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
All right, we'll take one, maybe two more questions.
This is the first panel I've been on where there's gifts. This is wonderful.
Your name and your question.
Hi, my name is Lauren Sobert. I didn't think ahead to bring a gift. I'm a huge Jeopardy fan. We watch all the time. It's amazing how much you know and the ability to answer so many questions. As I'm playing at home, I maybe get 1/3, 1/10. Is it how quick you hit the buzzer? I'm just so curious, because it seems you know so much. How do you win?
Yeah, no, I mean, that is a big factor, and it's something that you can't really know until you get there, whether you've got the timing down or not. I mean, I certainly did, when I knew I was going to be on the show, when I was watching at home, I had like a pen that I was, practicing with just to get in the habit of it. But you can't know whether you're maybe coming a little too early or a little too late. And so that's just something you find out when you get there. And I was lucky enough, and I, genuinely don't know why, but like I was lucky enough to have, a good timing on it. And it makes a lot of difference, especially, as I've gone on to like sort of the tournaments of champions and things like that, where everybody on there has had success, and all of you know a lot. That's just, what it comes down to is it's not the only thing that matters, but it is a big factor.
What's the deal on that? You have to wait until he has finished asking the question?
Yeah.
Then you gotta get in right after that?
That's right, because if you ring in too early, then when the question is finished, your buzz will be on a slight delay, and so anybody else can get in ahead of you. And it's actually like, what it is when he finishes reading the question, somebody, some crew member off somewhere, like, flips a switch that enables the buzzers and these lights turn on. And so basically what you're really trying to do is kind of like mind meld with that person out there, wherever he is, and feel like, that when you want to be pressing your buzzer at the same time they're flipping that switch. And so that's what you're trying to do.
So if they're a little slow on a given question, you can get locked out.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, but I mean, they do this, all day, every day for their job, like, and they are like really consistent about it. It's there is a rehearsal, and in the morning, we all get a chance to go on stage, but the rehearsal, it's not Ken doing the clues, it's Jimmy, who used to be on the Clue crew and is now the stage manager there. Sure. He's doing it, and he doesn't have quite the same like rhythm and timing as Ken Jennings. Like, he tries to do as good of a job as he can, but he's a different person.
Sure.
And so, like, it doesn't help as much as you would like it to with getting your timing right, actually. Yeah.
That's great. Let's take our final question. Hello, your name and your question.
I'm Jessica, and I just wanted to check in. I've lived in the Culver City area, so I wanted to see when you were there for a very long time hanging out. What sort of things did you do in the area? Were you part of the backstage bar crew? Did you just hang out at Doubletree?
Yes, actually. It's during my run. And then for the later tournaments, they tended to put us up in the either the Culver Hotel, which I love. It's like every room is different. It's where all the Munchkins stayed when they were filming The Wizard of Oz. Is the fun fact. But yeah, no, I do like, I will like, depending on the schedule exactly, but I'll go out to, there's like public school, we'll go out there and drink sometimes afterwards, or a sports bar down the road, I forget what it's called. But it's also, I talked to someone there once that was a local that I ran into, and I was like, said something about the nightlife. He's like, there's no nightlife in Culver City, which is true, so yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, I'll toss it back to you.
All right, one final question. What book are you loving right now and recommending to all of your friends?
Well, it is the fourth book in the series that I'm actually like literally reading on my phone, like on the way over here in the car. It's called The Tomb of Dragons by Catherine Addison. But I'd recommend starting at the beginning of the book, The Goblin Emperor, which is one of my favorite books in the last 10 years or so. And it's like, it's a, fantasy novel, but about this half-goblin who unexpectedly inherits the throne of the Elflands. And it sounds sort of silly, but it's really just all about like the intense court politics, because everybody's kind of working against him, and he's been in exile. He doesn't know the court, and he has to figure it all out, and it's life and death stakes. And it's just such a wonderful central character. And then she went on and wrote 3 more books that are set in a completely different city with this very minor character from the first book. And those are like these gritty noir detective novels, but in this fantasy setting. And just the world building is incredible, and I just love these books.
Awesome. Thank you so much for spending the time with us. Thank you to our amazing audience.
I want to let you know you can pick up a copy of Who is Amy Schneider over at Vroman's Bookstore, and Amy will be signing those books. One more time, a big hand for Amy Schneider and Vanessa Franco.